Yeah, there were like 50 people signed up, so looks like there's 20 in the waiting room.
And you have the video queued up?
I have the video queued up. It's, how do I say this? I guess, when did you want to play the video?
There's a part in the slide about completing your stress cycle. The first item on that list is movement. And so when I get to that point, then I would say, you know, as soon as I get to movement, I would ask you, I will say, you know, Alyssa, would you mind please playing the video? I don't know if it'll go so well, right? But I just think
yeah, I think it's really cool. I watched it today and it's
funny,
super cool. So
I laugh
what I could do is trying to think how I would do that. Would anybody know any tips? Because I could stop sharing it and then just play the YouTube, because I have it up here and then I'd have to go back. I don't know of another easier transition. You know what I'm saying?
So you're sharing your screen and that's where the slides are?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think you have to go out of YouTube. I'm sorry, out of the screen where your slides are.
And then go into this. Yeah. Because I couldn't figure out a way to embed it. But that's okay. People are pretty flexible.
Okay.
I think
well, it's 5:32. Should we let the people in?
Yeah, hold on. Let me share my screen. Michelle, can you let them in? For some reason, I'm not seeing now that I have the PowerPoint up.
Okay, I'm going to admit all.
Okay, great.
Welcome, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, Dr. Faust.
Hello. How are you doing?
Great.
Fine. Thank you. How are you?
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, we got it. We're here.
Oh, Manette and Jackie are here. Hi, guys. Jeff, how you doing?
Hi, Dr. Faust.
Hello. So I might see you all.
Oh, did he call? He's working. But you said it's being taped, right?
Yes.
Hi, Ray.
Hello.
All right. How many people do we have on so far, Michelle?
25.
Okay. We'll wait a few more minutes.
Well, while you're all waiting, it might be a good idea if you don't already get something to write with and something to write on in case you want to take some notes. I purposely left some detail out of the slides so it would be a little easier to kind of listen to what I'm saying, but I'm happy to repeat anything that is missed along the way. And then it would also be really helpful to have a book or a magazine, something like that. It doesn't matter what the content is, just something of that shape for an exercise we're going to do later.
Well, Dr. Faust, do you think we're ready to get started, or you want to go ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay, so I'd like to introduce Dr. Rachel Faust. We're happy to have her this evening with us for our Anxiety and Stress Mercy Hospital, Jewish Hospital Mercy Health Speaker Series. Thank you all for being here. And take it away, Rachel.
All right, thank you so much. Hello, everyone. It's so nice to be here with you. I'm Dr. Rachel Faust, and I am a licensed clinical psychologist and behavioral health consultant with Mercy Health. I earned my doctorate in clinical psychology from Xavier University. And just a little bit about my training. I did my pre-doctoral internship at the Cleveland VA, focusing on geropsychology, working with older adults. And I did a postdoctoral fellowship at the Cincinnati VA, where I focused on interprofessional team-based care, which was a great primer for my current role as a behavioral health consultant with Mercy. So for the past 5 years, I've been working in 3 primary care offices, providing targeted behavioral health treatment for patients of the primary care providers with whom I work. So I only see patients of the offices where I'm embedded, and I do a lot of collaborative care with the providers and with the patients. So we all kind of work together as a team. My visits are 30 minutes long, and they tend to be a little bit more action oriented than traditional psychotherapy. And I spend a lot of my time addressing anxiety and stress management. So I'm really excited to be able to share this time with you to help you build your knowledge and skill set in this area. And if anyone just joined and wasn't here when I said it, you're going to want something to write with, just to keep notes if you want, and then also a book or magazine of some kind for an exercise we'll do later. So I thought we could start with an exercise, something that we can do to get us in this mode of focusing on ourselves. We want to set a positive intention for our time together, and a great way to get into a space where we can focus on our own needs is to start with a focus on loving kindness. So if we can do the next slide, please. For those of us who identify as caregivers, it can be somewhat difficult to show that same kind of care to ourselves. So we can start by identifying someone we love who can be a recipient of that loving kindness, just to get it flowing. And rather than focusing on the outcome of this exercise, for now, we just want to focus on what the process feels like. So if you would, please find a comfortable posture, ideally sitting up straight. And you can close your eyes if you feel comfortable doing so. I find that helpful, but some people don't like that. And then you just want to rest your gaze somewhere that's not too distracting. Start by taking a few deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth. bring your mind and body into a calm state and try to feel your body coming in contact with the surface on which you're sitting to ground yourself. Once you feel relaxed and aware of the present moment, start thinking about someone with whom you share an emotional connection, maybe a spouse, child, parent, or a friend. Notice how you feel as you start thinking about this person for whom you feel so strongly. Imagine this person in your mind's eye. Picture a direct connection between your heart and their heart. Use this connection to send all the loving kindness that you feel to that person. It may be a visual experience. You can actually watch the loving kindness flowing from your heart to theirs, or it could be done using words. So maybe things like, may you be safe, may you live long, may you have what you want and deserve in life. Notice this positivity filling up the heart of this person for whom you care so deeply. And when their heart gets full, watch it spilling over and filling up the rest of their body from head to toe. Love, compassion, protection. And when they've become so full that they can't receive any more from you, notice as the excess loving kindness that you sent to them starts to make its way back to your heart. Feel it filling up your heart, all this love, kindness, compassion, protection, spilling over into the rest of your body. And notice how it feels, both physically and emotionally, to be the recipient of this loving kindness that you sent to your loved one, and to feel connected to this person in this way. And I just want to let you experience that for a moment or two. And whenever you're ready, please bring your focus back to this space that we're sharing here and now. And notice any changes that you feel. Maybe a relaxing of your muscles, tingling in your body, or maybe even a sense of annoyance if this wasn't your thing. Whatever it is that you feel, it's fine. Just notice it with curiosity and awareness. And take another deep breath and come back to this space. That is our intention for today, to find ways to bring more loving kindness into our lives, whether it's by sending it out or bringing it back in. But now that we've set our intention, I want to spend a little time talking about stress, giving you a little bit of background information, and then we'll talk about some more strategies to help all of us manage, because we could all certainly use it in this day and age. Melissa, would you mind changing the slide, please? Thank you. So a little bit of background. So the word stress is usually associated with negativity, but stress is not always bad. Positive stress, otherwise known as eustress, is helpful for us. There's a law called the Yerkes Dodson Law that says that we need a certain level of arousal or stress for optimal performance, which is what this image shows. So on the left side of the blue rectangle, it shows that if we're understimulated, we may not have enough motivation or energy to accomplish what we need or want to do. And this is often the case for those of us who tend to wait until the last minute to get things done, because that's when we've built up enough stress to actually feel motivated to do whatever has to be done. And on the other side of the blue rectangle, if we're overstimulated, we may feel too fatigued, overwhelmed, or burnt out to focus well enough to accomplish our goals. So we perform best when our level of stress is somewhere in the blue part, in the middle. Finding that sweet spot can be particularly challenging, especially with all the stress that we're under in this day and age. Would you change the slide, please? So anytime we're in danger, or there's stress in our environment, or there's stress that our mind creates, our body kicks into high gear to prepare us for whatever's coming next. Our body doesn't know the difference between danger and stress. It's the same system that activates no matter what, just to varying degrees depending on the nature of the stressor. So we've got this autonomic nervous system that's responsible for bodily functions that help us react to stress. And those are the ones that we don't consciously control. They just happen automatically. And that part of our nervous system is divided into two parts. We've got the sympathetic part and the parasympathetic. So the sympathetic, as I'm sure a lot of you know, it's our body's gas pedal that helps us shift into overdrive. We're going to manage stressors. That's our fight, flight, freeze system. And depending on the situation, we may need to fight to move towards the danger, flee or move away from the danger, or freeze, which happens when our body slams on the brakes because it senses that this is the best way to keep us safe. And we don't always have a say in the matter. Sometimes our body chooses for us. So to get our body ready for whatever it needs to do, adrenaline starts coursing through our bodies. Blood rushes from unnecessary processes like digestion to parts that need it, like our arms and legs getting ready to run or fight. And breathing becomes more rapid to get enough oxygen into our bodies. And this process is really helpful when we're dealing with short-term stressors, especially dangerous ones. But in the long term, if this process continues in our body unchecked, then it can do some real damage. It can cause wear and tear on our blood vessels. So we create weak places where plaque can build up, which can lead to heart disease. And also our upper GI system is going to slow down when we're stressed out, while our lower GI system, gastrointestinal system, speeds up, which can create IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. Chronic stress also affects our ability to get quality sleep, which our bodies need in order to repair that daily damage to our bodies. So we all know that too much stress can be bad. These are some of the specific ways that it can be bad. But we've also got this other system in our body, the parasympathetic nervous system, which is our body's brakes. It's what's known as our rest and digest system or our rest and relax system. It's active when we feel calm and everything feels okay. And in this mode, our energy can be channeled towards non-emergency processes like digestion and supporting our immune system. So the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems are like two sides to the same coin. We cannot be in both at the same time. But it's not so simple to quickly transition from fight, flight, freeze to the rest and relax system when our fight, flight, freeze system is highly activated. Our body has to go through a process of transitioning by completing our stress cycle, which we'll talk about in more detail later. Melissa, would you change the slide, please? So let's discuss the role that emotions play in terms of stress. An emotion is an involuntary neurological response with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I've heard a lot of people tell me that they try not to feel certain emotions or that they feel badly about the way that they do feel. So they have a feeling and then they have guilt about having the feeling. My response is generally the following. Emotions are not good or bad. They're not right or wrong. They're just helpful pieces of information to let us know what's going on inside. Some may be more pleasant than others, but they're not within our control. It can be helpful to understand what an emotion is in terms of the three components that make it up. So there's the subjective part. For example, right now I'm feeling really happy about this opportunity to get to share this information with you. My happy may be different from yours because it's what I judge happy to feel like. And anxiety is also one of those emotions that can really vary widely from person to person because it's such a subjective experience. And then there's the behavioral part. So I may smile or laugh when I'm happy, frown or cry when I'm sad. And if I feel anxious or angry, I might bite my husband's head off, which might be different from what you do when you feel that way, right? It all looks different behaviorally and subjectively. The third part is the physiological part, or what goes on inside the body when you have an emotion. So that's the involuntary neurological response with the beginning, middle, and an end. We have absolutely no control over how we feel, but we can control what we do in response to our emotions. So if we allow ourselves to ride the wave of an unpleasant emotion, you're going to watch it peak and eventually subside. Actually, that happens with pleasant emotions too, right? None of them last forever. But if you go with it, it's going to come to an end. When we try to avoid emotions, they're just going to be there waiting for us whenever we're ready to deal with them. And the more we try to push them away, the more stress that can create in our bodies too. And just to kind of go back to what I was saying before, the pleasant emotions can activate the sympathetic nervous system too. So when I get excited, which I was before this talk, my heart was racing, I had a lot of energy, I was a little shaky, that works itself out. There's nothing I needed to do except, right, enjoy the ride of my emotion. because that was a pleasant one. Whereas unpleasant emotions are also going to activate the fight, flight, freeze response, but maybe do so even more. So anxiety in particular is a really normal emotion that most of us experience at some point. It's usually related to thoughts about the future and our efforts to prepare for what's to come. So mild anxiety can actually be really helpful if it makes us proactive, do problem solving. But beyond that, the rest is just uncomfortable. And too much anxiety can lead to anxiety disorders, which are only diagnosed if the anxiety is actually getting in the way of your functioning. And at that point, it's worthwhile to consider seeking help from a therapist, from your doctor, just in general. Now, burnout happens when we repeatedly get stuck in the middle of an emotion and aren't routinely completing our stress cycles. And we know we're burnt out when we experience the things listed here. So compassion fatigue, that comes from caring too much for too long, which really depletes our empathy and our ability to continue caring. Depersonalization, which is this distant or indifferent or even cynical attitude, is also a part of burnout. And this decreased sense of accomplishment, like feeling as though what's the point of even trying? So this futility that takes over. And it's really important to remember there is a difference between the stressor, which is the thing that's causing the stress, and the stress itself. So removing the stressor from the environment does not mean our body is ready to shift into rest and relax mode because the stress cycle hasn't been completed. We still need to do things that will actually bring our stress cycle to a close so we won't get stuck in the middle of an emotion. I've had a lot of people say to me, and I think I've actually had this experience too, where the thing that was causing the stress goes away and you wonder, why do I still feel this way? That's because the stress cycle is not complete. And you'll know when it's complete, your body will let you know. The good news is that we don't have to wait for the stressor to go away in order to complete our own stress cycle. We can do that anytime, and the more often, the better. Next slide, please. Is it not working?
Yeah, let me try hitting it again here. I did get a email real quick. Can you speak a little louder, Dr. Faust?
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you for the feedback. It looks like it's stuck.
Yeah, it is. It's stuck.
Okay.
But
Well,
we'll unstick it. There we go. Okay.
oh, there we go. Okay. So this is a wheel of emotions, and I know it's hard to read, but I included it here to give you a visual for how many different emotions exist. So the middle circle, the one in the center, I should say, includes the main categories of emotions, and each outer ring makes them more nuanced. So for those of us who have difficulty identifying our emotions, it can be helpful to consult a wheel like this, which you can find just by Googling it, to help you recognize what you're feeling. Next slide, please. So before I focus on ways to complete our stress cycle, I think it's important to clarify that healthy self-care habits are foundational for managing stress. So we need to aim for adequate sleep and good nutrition because those are the building blocks that help us function well. Our body does a lot of resting and repairing overnight when we're sleeping. And in terms of our digestion, so our guts actually manufacture 90% of the neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine that our brains need to maintain optimal health. And our guts thrive on biodiversity. So feeding our bodies a large variety of plant-based foods is going to provide the good bacteria that our body needs to thrive and also we need in order to manage our stress better. So it's just something to think about. So I want to mention a podcast episode that I think is wonderful and does a lot of actually explaining of the same kind of information that I'm sharing right now. So I want to cite my source as well. Brene Brown's podcast called Unlocking Us has a wonderful episode in which she interviews co-authors and identical twin sisters, Emily and Amelia Nagoski, about their book, which is called Burnout. And the episode includes a lot of the information about, like I said, that I'm sharing today, especially about completing your stress cycle, and I would highly recommend it. And I will include more information about that at the end. So we're going to cover a number of different tools that they recommend for completing your stress cycle, with the caveat that we should not expect all of these to work for each of us. One of the authors noted in the podcast that movement is her go-to way to relieve stress, whereas her identical twin sister wouldn't use movement to relieve her stress if you paid her. So everybody is different. So I want to move into the ways that they recommend with a video. Melissa, would you mind playing the video, please?
Ma'am, we still have trouble hearing you. Maybe you could speak a little louder, get a little closer.
Sure, I'm so sorry about that. Is that any better? Okay. Are other people having trouble hearing me too? Okay. I wonder if sometimes headphones will help. Okay. Sometimes
Can hear you great.
Okay, thank you. So this is a great example. I think we need to start the video over. I think we missed half of it, or I did. You just watch it in reverse. So this is a great example of how movement can be such a wonderful thing, right? It doesn't matter how you move. It is always a wonderful way to complete our stress cycle. We can go back to the slides now. Thank you. So whether it's strenuous exercise like, cardiovascular exercise, strength training, walking at any pace, stretching, dancing like this nice gentleman, or even just getting up and moving to a new location in your home, movement of any kind can be a very helpful way to regulate your nervous system. And it goes very well with diaphragmatic breathing, which we're going to practice now together. So that is the next suggestion that they make in terms of completing your stress cycle. So just keep in mind, every time we inhale, our heart rate speeds up. Every time we exhale, it slows down. So normal breathing maintains a balance between the two. And when our nervous system gets activated, we naturally start to take in more oxygen, but we don't necessarily expend a larger amount of carbon dioxide. And so there's an imbalance that happens in our body, which can lead to an actual pH imbalance that mimics panic symptoms and can cause dizziness and lightheadedness, which of course makes us more anxious, which can activate our body even more and can lead to panic attacks for some of us. So diaphragmatic breathing is breathing that's slower and deeper than usual and involves the diaphragm muscle at the top of the belly, which helps to control our breath. So we want to focus on slowing down our inhale and making it deeper, trying to expand our belly like a balloon, really lengthening the exhale for as long as you can. So to
Can
help
you
you
hold on
remember,
just a second, Dr. Faust? We're still seeing the video and not any slides.
Melissa, is it possible to go back to the slides?
Sometimes technology is not our friend.
So while Melissa's working on this, we're just going to practice some breathing together, okay? So, and I like that I can see you right now. So let's work on starting with a slow inhale through our nose, down through our chest, into our bellies as deep as we can comfortably go. You can hold it for a beat at the bottom of the inhale, or you can go right into the exhale, but really focus on lengthening the exhale, okay? So let's do it together. Slow inhale. Now, if you start to feel lightheaded from doing this, it's because your body's taking in more oxygen than it's used to. just shorten the inhale a little more. Don't take in quite so much oxygen, but still focus on lengthening that exhale. And if you're prone to panic attacks, it actually can be really helpful not to take a deep breath. Instead, to pretend that oxygen is really expensive and you can only afford to take in a little bit. So it's a very short and shallow inhale, but a long exhale like this. And once your body starts to calm down, then you can slowly start taking deeper breaths. And aside, I actually personally find that putting a noise to an exhale is cathartic, and it gets some of that energy out in difficult moments. So you can either do it through pursed lips or through a wide open mouth, and I'll show you both. And maybe try it with me, okay? So first, pursed lips. Slow inhale. Noisy exhale. Sometimes that helps to push more of that tension out of your body. Now let's do a wide open mouth with a noisy exhale. However you do it is fine. The more often, the better. Because every time you practice this form of breathing, you're shifting your body into rest and relax mode. You're giving your mind a break from whatever your stress was. So you're basically taking a little bit of a mental health break too. And sometimes it can really be enough to help you calm down, or just to help you reset. Social connection is next on the list. So really connecting with people we trust and feel supported by can also help us complete our stress cycles. So whether you're talking with that person about sources of stress, focusing on other things to get your mind off of it, or just spending time together, being with others sends a message to our brains that we're safe because we're with our community, which is what our ancestors needed in order to stay safe. So as a result, our nervous system gets the message that it can safely calm down. I know a lot of us, some of us may avoid other people when we're feeling stressed and overwhelmed. I don't have time for that. I've got other things I need to do, but it can actually be a really useful tool. Long hugs and laughter also fall under that category. 20 seconds for a hug, it feels like a really long time, but it can really make a difference in giving your nervous system enough time to feel like, okay, I can let this go. I can set my baggage down and get back to something that feels better. And authentic laughter can be helpful. And to be clear, that refers to like a deep belly laugh, not that polite social laughter that we all do. The more embarrassing, the better, because that means you're really into it. And also, finally, creativity of any kind can lead to completing our stress cycle. Sometimes that creativity may relate to whatever the emotion or the stress is, but it really doesn't have to. And I know a lot of us, some of us don't consider ourselves to be creative people, but if you think back, none of us felt that way about ourselves as children, right? Little ones all feel creative. And I think as we get older, if we don't feel like we're nurturing that, it's easy to turn it off. But there's so many different ways to access your creativity: crafting, music, art, dance, cooking, writing. The list goes on. So any kind of creativity can be a good way to complete your stress cycle. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about mindfulness. Mindfulness is defined by Jon Kabat-Zinn, one of the leaders in the mindfulness movement, as paying attention in a certain way, on purpose, focused on the present moment, and it's non-judgmental in nature. So sometimes mindfulness involves noticing pleasant sensations going on inside us or around us. Other times those sensations or experiences are pretty unpleasant. Regardless, we're not trying to change anything or judge. We're just noticing what is. And mindfulness is like a muscle. So the more we practice it, the easier it becomes to use it. And our focus really is routinely being pulled to the future and the past. And that's normal and natural. It takes effort to focus on the present moment for any extended period of time. So even Buddhist monks who've been practicing mindfulness throughout their lives still call it practice for a reason. It's not our nature, but we can get better at it. And the reason it's good focus on it and to get better at it is because it helps us access a part of our frontal lobes that is responsible for self-awareness, both in terms of what's going on inside of us and around us. And that is the only part of our logical thinking brain that has direct access to the part of our brain that's responsible for that fight, flight, freeze reaction. Logic can't touch that reaction, but self-awareness can. And so the more you practice and exercise that mindfulness muscle in any way you want to, the less reactive you become to stress overall. So something to keep in mind. So diaphragmatic breathing, like we've already talked about, great way to practice mindfulness. We won't do it again right now. As long as you're focused on your breath, it counts as mindfulness. The next exercise is grounding. Grounding involves noticing what your senses are experiencing in the present moment, because your mind is then focused on something neutral in the present, which means it's busy and it can't be focused on whatever was stressing you out. And that can be accomplished in a lot of different ways. So basically, these are distraction tools, the grounding exercises. They're not going to solve any problems, but if your nervous system is overloaded and you then stop feeding it with whatever was overloading it because you're focused on something neutral, it can really give your body a chance to shift into rest and relax mode. So some examples of grounding include things like naming colors out loud, if you can, describing what you see around you, touching soothing textures, or noticing your body coming in contact with the furniture you're sitting on now, noticing smells, listening to music, and really paying attention to the lyrics, the instruments, the voice, all of that. Doing the dishes is a great way to ground yourself, actually, because you can feel the temperature of the water, the texture of the sponge, the smell of the soap, all of that. Or the 5-5-5 exercise is another good one. You name 5 things you can see right now, 5 things you can hear, and 5 things you can touch, and then 4 of each, and 3 of each, then 2, and so on. And if you get to the end and you're not feeling any different, you start back up at 5 and you find 5 more things, and you go until your nervous system has made that shift. The next one is progressive muscle relaxation. So we're going to actually do this together now. I want to lead you through a progressive muscle relaxation exercise followed by a body scan. So let's start by getting into a comfortable position again. And I want you to close your eyes and take a few deep breaths just to get yourself kind of centered in your body, if you can. And I want you to bring your attention down to your feet. While you're continuing to breathe, I want you to squeeze your toes, tense your feet up, every muscle you can find, squeeze it as tight as you can while you continue to breathe. And hold it and keep breathing and squeezing. Now let go of all of that tension and notice the difference between the tension and the release. And send your next inhale down into your feet to relax them even more. And on the exhale, imagine your feet melting into the floor, just being as relaxed and loose as they can be. Now bring your attention up to your hands. Take another deep breath in. Ball your hands up into fists and just squeeze as tight as you can, putting all your energy into that. Don't hold your breath. And relax your hands, open them up. Move your fingers around a bit, just noticing how they're feeling right now. The difference between the tension and the release. Let them hang loose and heavy on your lap. Now bring your attention up to your shoulders. And this time we're not going to tense or tighten anything. We're just going to move around a little. Notice if there's any spots that feel sore or tight or tense. I want you to take a deep inhale into those spots. And on the exhale, see if you can relax them even more. And if some spots don't want to let the tension go, that's okay too. Just being aware of what is. Now take another deep breath as you bring your attention up to the top of your head. I want you to do a body scan where you work your attention down your body, one muscle group at a time, including the small ones like your forehead, your jaw, larger ones as well. And you're just noticing what's going on in your body, using your breath as an anchor to keep bringing your attention back to it over and over. And when you get to the tip of your toes, you can bring your attention back to the space. Now, progressive muscle relaxation is a great way to notice and relieve tension in your body any time of the day or night. It can help you fall asleep and get back to sleep during the night if you wake up, because it gives your mind something to anchor you in the present. It's also a really useful tool when you're feeling angry or irritable during the day. So you can choose one muscle group to focus all of your energy on for a brief time, or you can do the whole scan. You can tense and release. Some people need to tense their muscles in order to bring their attention to them. Or you can just notice in your mind, think about that body part to bring your attention to it, and use your breath to relax it. Because some people don't like to bring more tension into their bodies. There's no right or wrong way to do it, but it can be a really useful tool. Visualization is the next mindfulness exercise. It involves taking a vacation in your mind. Now, we're not going to do this now, but the goal here is to picture yourself in a space that feels safe, comfortable, full of joy, just any place. It could be a place you've been, a place you've always wanted to go but have never been, or a place you just completely make up. What makes it visualization is closing your eyes, taking deep breaths, putting yourself there, and then grounding yourself in that space. So noticing what your senses are experiencing in order to fully immerse yourself in it. So what can I see in this space? What can I hear? What can I smell? What does it feel like? Our brains benefit from imagining experiences, even if they're not happening in reality. And this mental rehearsal then becomes more than just a distraction. It can actually help by signaling to your brain that you're safe, which is a great way to shift into rest and relax mode. Next on the list is meditation. So meditation is a form of mindfulness that is widely discussed and can be accomplished in a variety of different ways. I often find that people who think they need to clear their minds are the most frustrated by meditation, because then they find that their mind's not going to do what they want it to do, because that's, how our minds work. They don't do what we want them to do. They just do what they do. And as a result, they say, I'm not good at it. I can't do it. Forget it. I'm not going to try. But in reality, the goal of meditation is actually to shift our relationship with our thoughts. So our minds are divided unequally into a thinking part, which takes up most of the space, and an observing part. So we spend most of our time in the thinking part and often assume if I think it, it must be true. Meditation allows us to strengthen the observer part that watches the thoughts come and go without needing to jump on board and ride off into the sunset with each and every one. So the more our mind wanders, the better, actually, because the goal is to notice when that's happened and then choose to bring your attention back to the moment. And every time you wander and come back, you're strengthening that observer part. So it's like a mental rep in the gym for your brain. And it becomes easier over time, even with just a few minutes of meditation on a regular basis, to change your brain to be less reactive to stress. Like I was saying before, that fear center, the amygdala, starts to shrink in size with regular meditation. Our frontal lobes, they start to form new connections, and all of this makes us less reactive to stress in our lives. So it's not just an in the moment benefit we get from meditation. And in fact, sometimes we don't get a benefit in the moment. We just get frustrated, but we still get benefit in the long run. And some days it's better, some days it's not as good. But I find that really actually guided meditation is a great way to get started. And for some of us, it's actually useful to continue with that, because having that voice to anchor us to the present is really helpful. And I'll share the names of some apps that I like at the end of this. So that's meditation. Yoga is next. Yoga is a great way to practice mindfulness, especially for those of us who have difficulty with those more sedentary, the sitting still forms of mindfulness. The movements help to connect our body with our breath, which increases our awareness of what's going on inside of us. Yoga with Adriene is my favorite online resource for yoga. I'll include that at the end as well. And the last mindfulness exercise or collection of exercises I want to mention are tip strategies, which are really useful in moments when we feel incredibly overwhelmed and we need help to calm down quickly. So starting with temperature, and that's what it stands for. You can see there, temperature, intense exercise. And it's actually a double P, it's TIPP. It's paced breathing along with progressive muscle relaxation. So starting with temperature, I think we all know that a warm bath or a hot shower can be a good way to relax, but cold can actually be really helpful too. So cold can activate the vagus nerve, which is our 10th cranial nerve. And that's actually the driving force behind the rest and relax system. So being able to access that easily is really helpful in those moments when we're just very overwhelmed or stressed. So dipping our forehead in a bowl of ice water for up to 30 seconds can activate the vagus nerve. By the way, that's not something you want to do if you have a heart condition. So just keep that in mind. But if your heart is healthy and you're in an overwhelmed state, that ice water sends the message to your brain that it's okay to calm down. And it can happen pretty quickly. Or you can take something frozen from the freezer and place it either on your forehead, the back of your neck, your chest, the inside of your wrist, or even hold it in your hands for a bit. And that can actually really help too. I've had a number of people tell me that they're really helped by holding ice cubes in their hands. So the next one, intense exercise, can take that energy that you're feeling and wear it out of your body quickly. So that could be anything from running in place as fast as you can for a brief time, doing as many push-ups, sit-ups, squats until you've worn yourself out. The goal is to really wear out that energy. And then the last one we've already discussed, but like I said, they're just very helpful tools in times of high stress. All right, next slide, please. So I've talked a lot about stress management. I haven't talked a ton about anxiety. I think they go hand in hand oftentimes, but thought management, I think, gets more towards the anxiety piece in particular. And there's a variety of different tools that can be very helpful to manage thoughts. We cannot control them. I actually did my dissertation on perceived thought controllability in mindfulness and anxiety. And what was very clear is that the harder you try not to think about something, the more that's the only thing your brain wants to think about. So we don't suppress thoughts. We find ways to manage them. So journaling is a great way to start. Writing helps us process our thoughts and emotions. So whether we do it by hand or we type it into an app, it can be really helpful to help us work through whatever's going on in the moment. Particularly if we've got this endless loop going in our minds. Our minds are very good storytellers and they don't want to stop. They're always trying to make sense of the world around us. And so that loop will continue on for as long as we let it. And it can really add stress and anxiety to our lives. And there's something about getting it out, whether talking about it or writing it or typing it, that causes us to slow down. So we have to focus on what we're doing, what we're writing. And it also allows us to make sense of things in a way that is sometimes hard to do in our minds. And it can really help us move through emotions. Some people focus on having a daily journaling practice. I find that quite impressive. I've never been able to do that. I actually find that for me personally, I've got this app that I like called Day One, ONE. It's a journaling app that you can password protect. And anytime I'm having a difficult moment, I open up a new entry in that app and I start to type. And I just type until I'm done, until I feel something different or I've worked through a problem. And I could do it every day for a while, or I might go months without it, but it's just there when I need it. But everybody's different, right? So it's just good to try different things and see what works for you. The gratitude practice is next. So gratitude journaling is a great habit to get into to manage worries and thoughts, and also just to shift our perspective. And when we're doing it consistently, it actually shifts our perspective throughout the day because we start to look for examples of things to be grateful for in our daily lives, which just changes our attitude. And it can also be a great way to end the day because it can just help us go to sleep in a more pleasant way and have more pleasant dreams when we have a positive perspective before we go to sleep. Worry management strategies can also be helpful just to help us feel a little more in control of our worries. So this involves setting a worry time. or about 30 minutes each day that we're going to spend focusing on our worries. And it's helpful to set it for the same time each day if you can. And that time can be spent worrying. It can be spent problem solving, taking steps to address the worries. You can use it for whatever you want, but that is your time for worries. And anytime a worry occurs outside of that time, and you notice, you remind yourself that it's not your worry time yet. And then you write down that worry on your worry log so that you can focus on it during your worry time later. And over time, you'll notice that you're not spending as much of your time worrying each day. So worry is no longer being associated with all of these different experiences in your life, and it just stops being as prevalent. And then also, people often find that they don't need to use their full worry time after a while, or they skip it entirely. So less time is spent worrying in our daily lives. I've also found that for a lot of people, replacing worry with a loving kindness practice can be very useful. We all know that worry doesn't keep our loved ones safe or keep bad things from happening. It just upsets us and wears us out. So when we catch ourselves worrying, particularly about someone we love, it can actually feel quite empowering to shift into sending that person our love and kindness, which feels more protective and has benefits for our well-being too. Okay, so I want to do another exercise now. So I'm going to demonstrate the theory behind acceptance and commitment therapy using an experiential metaphor. So now if you have that book or that magazine or even a pad of paper, just something you can hold, now is the time to grab that. So let's imagine that this item, this book, I'll call it, is a book that contains all of your anxiety, your worries, your stress, your fear. It's all written in here. I want you to hold it up about an inch in front of your face, right up there, blocking your view. Now, the room around you contains everything in your life that you value. Right now, you are hyper-focusing on your stress, anxiety, fear, all of that contained in this book. And when you're doing that, how much of your view is free to focus on the other things in your life that you value? I'm guessing probably not much. You can see an inch here and there, but that's about it. And if I asked you to hold that book there with all of your stress and fear and worries while you hyper-focus all day, do you think your arms would get tired? Probably. They probably already are. So you'd have very, very little bandwidth left over to commit to the other things that you value in your life because you're so busy hyper-focusing on the things that are concerning you. Okay, you can lower the book. Now, if we were in the same room, next we do a reverse tug of war with my hand pushing on one side of the book and your hand pushing on the other, each trying to move the book away from ourselves. But since we can't do that, I want you to put one of your hands on one side of the book and your other hand on the other side of the book and push your hands together to simulate pushing the book away from you, okay? So this is you avoiding your fear, your anxiety, your stress, your worries, all of it. It's potentially going to be helpful in the short term because you're getting it to go away. And also you have your bandwidth, you have your view free to focus on the other things in your life that you value. But if I asked you to do this all day long, you'd feel pretty worn out and you'd probably find it difficult to have the energy to put towards other things that matter to you. Okay, so you can put that down. Actually, I'd like you to place it in your lap. So we've established that hyper-focusing on our stress and avoiding it will wear us out pretty quickly. So now we've got both whatever the contents of the book are making us feel, fear, anxiety, stress, all of that. And then the added suffering that we're adding because we're either avoiding it or spending too much time focusing on it, thereby pulling us away from the other things that we value in our life. So now instead, we're going to put it on our lap and just let it sit there. So your stress, your anxiety, your worries, they're not gone. They're still present, sitting right on your lap. But how much of your energy is required to let them sit in your lap? I would imagine not much, not nearly as much as the hyper-focusing or the avoiding. And your view is free to focus on other things that you value in your life. You've got more energy to devote to them as well because it's not being pulled in these other directions. And that is our goal, to shift away from hyper-focusing and avoiding so that we can hold our stress more lightly while we focus on whatever else is important to us in our lives. That's the goal of ACT, acceptance and commitment therapy. So it teaches us to focus on what's called cognitive diffusion. So cognitive fusion is how we usually are with our thoughts. We hold on tight to them and we assume if I think it, it must be true. With cognitive diffusion, we're holding our thoughts more lightly. And instead of saying, don't believe everything you hear, a good rule of thumb that comes from ACT is to remind ourselves, don't believe everything you think. So just because I think it doesn't make it true. And it can be freeing to watch thoughts come and go and identify them as thoughts. So something like, I just had the thought that, as opposed to, oh no, what if? So it's just a different way of engaging with our thoughts. And the more often we can notice when we're hyper-focusing and avoiding, and remind ourselves to just hold it in our lap instead, the easier it becomes to let those worries pass on by without hanging on to them too tightly. Next slide, please. So I want to focus on self-compassion as the last thing before I bring my part to a close. So many of us tend to be pretty hard on ourselves, which can add significant stress to our lives. So we hold ourselves up to this high standard, which is great if we meet it, but can also be cause for beating ourselves up if we don't meet those goals that we set for ourselves. And that's the nature of self-esteem. We only get to feel good about ourselves if we believe we're meeting or exceeding the bar that's set for us. And it's important to remember, self-esteem is not the same thing as self-compassion. Self-compassion is unconditional kindness that we show ourselves. It's not in place of self-esteem. It's actually a building block for it. So it consists of these things that are listed here, starting with self-kindness. So we want to accept disappointment and suffering with sympathy and kindness rather than self-judgment, which only adds to suffering. Self-compassion also involves the idea that we've all got this common humanity. Basically, we all suffer and we all make mistakes. So I need to remind myself that I am not the only one. I'm not alone in this. It's normal. And that can really help to build self-compassion. And finally, self-compassion requires mindfulness. We can't ignore our pain while also feeling compassionate towards it. But I also don't want to over-identify with those thoughts and feelings and then get swept away by negativity. I just want to notice what is. And to be clear, self-compassion is not just letting ourselves off the hook. We can hold ourselves to a high standard and take personal responsibility while still practicing self-compassion, regardless of the outcome. So for example, if I lost my temper with my child, which I would never do, but if that ever happened, I could say either of the following to myself. So option A, I am the worst mother ever. What kind of horrible mother yells at her child? Or option B, wow, I did not like the way I just behaved at all. I know I've had a really rough day, but I'd still rather not treat my child that way. And I need to spend some time completing my stress cycle so I can do a better job moving forward. One of those is just punishing myself. The other is acknowledging, taking responsibility for my actions in a compassionate way that allows me to then focus on addressing the problem. And that's our goal. So self-compassion can be a great way to reduce some of that negativity we feel towards ourselves and actually make us function better in the world, because kindness helps. It really does. So before we do so let's go to the next slide, please, which are just references if you're interested. And then the slide after that is where you can leave it. These are some of the resources that I mentioned on the last slide, the one after, and we can leave that up. So before we do some Q&A, I wanted to leave you with my own message of loving kindness. I want to thank each and every one of you for taking this time to spend on yourselves, for learning about ways to complete your stress cycle so that you can have more quality and wellness in your life. So my loving kindness message for you is, may you be safe, may you live long, may you have the power to accept your anxiety, your anger, your sadness, and may you achieve what you want and deserve in your life. Thank you. Now, I'd be happy to take any questions that anyone has. You're welcome to unmute and speak them, or you're welcome to put them in the chat.
I have a question. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
You had a slide that talked about, it was titled Completing Your Stress Cycle.
Yes.
Bring it up if you want, but you talk about social connection.
Mhm.
And you mentioned long hugs and authentic laughter. There it is. What about just socializing with friends and maybe acquaintances? I mean, how important is that to reducing stress, and how often do you think one should engage in that?
Great question. So long hugs and authentic laughter are good examples of additional ways to benefit from social connection, but any time spent with or engaging with someone you care about is a good thing. So whether it's texting, talking on the phone, going out and doing things together, it doesn't matter the form. All that matters is that it's helpful for you. And, you know, if you can fit it in more often, that's great. Regular social connection can really make a difference. If you can only fit it in from time to time, that's okay too, but maybe it's a goal to do it more. I can't say, you know, specifically what's going to be most helpful for any given person. It's really going to depend on what's going on in their lives and who those connections are. But it is, I think, for a lot of us, an important part of our routine, especially lately when it's been so hard to come by. So I think that's a really good question. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'll probably have a follow-up in a minute, but
Okay.
thank you.
No problem.
Will it be possible to get your email?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you share with us? Okay.
Yes. So I didn't write it in here. I probably should have done that, but it's RM as in Mary, or actually Mara, RM Faust at mercy.com.
Okay.
Actually, I can put it in the chat.
Great.
Oh,
Thank
you, Bree. And Melissa. So let's see, what other questions do people have?
A question.
Sure.
Okay, so when you say completing your stress cycle, and I think I got about 6 different examples. So are you saying we have to, you should do all of these things, or whichever one you decide to do?
Mm-hmm.
What is the complete cycle, like stress cycle, or is it actually when the stress ends? Is that how? Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Say if I'm stressed out one day, so I'm at work, so I can take time out, like go on a break and practice the breathing things that you just taught us, and then once I come down, is that considered as completing that stress cycle at that time?
It's a great question. So back to the beginning of it, you do not need to do all of those different things in order to complete your stress cycle. Some of them may work for you sometimes, and other times those same ones won't work and you want to do different things. Or some people have their go-tos. So these are examples and options, but you may have ones that I didn't even include. So whatever works for you is perfectly fine. The stress cycle refers to your body, your sympathetic nervous system going into overdrive and then needing to come back down to a calm space. And so breathing may be the way that you complete your stress cycle sometimes, and that will be enough to get you to a point where your body is calmed down and you feel like you're back to normal, back to baseline. Whereas other times the breathing will be helpful in that moment where you really need it, but later at the end of a stressful day, maybe you need to do something else to get your body back to a place where it feels like you've really completed that cycle. It really is. Does that make sense? It's a very subjective experience. But there's no right or wrong way to do it. And don't feel like you need to go through that checklist and do everything on there, because it's certainly not the case. They're just options.
You know, because some people, I know you can be stressed out thinking about something in a day, and then that day goes to 2 days and 3 days and for a week, and now you've been stressed out for, quite a bit of time. So in other words, you say just take one of these techniques and do them for whatever period of time until that stress cycle is complete. Does that make sense?
Exactly. Exactly. And
Okay.
you'll know when it's complete because you'll be feeling better.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. It's a good question. Malka would like the slide before this, the references slide. Please, Melissa. Does anyone else have any other questions? Oh, I'm seeing another.
Yeah, I have a question.
Go ahead.
What is the difference between visualization and meditation?
So there's definitely some overlap, but meditation, let me go about this a different way. Visualization is envisioning something that is not presently happening. And it can mean a lot of different things. It could be visualizing, so imagining yourself in a space that feels good, calm, comfortable. You might be visualizing things that may happen in the future that you want to happen. Whereas meditation also involves sitting and being calm in a space. And you could probably combine the two, where you meditate on what it feels like to be in a, whatever space it was that you created. But in general, that's not what meditation is about. Meditation is more being in the here and now, watching your thoughts come and go. Sometimes it's about a mantra, focusing on saying the same thing over and over. There's a lot of different ways that you do it, but you don't generally as often take yourself to a different space, which is what we do with visualization. Does that make sense?
Rachel, there was a question earlier in the chat that says, any suggestions on how to help a friend, child, or spouse in the immediacy when you see them in acute stress?
So I think offering support is probably an important place to start. I think a lot of us are seeing loved ones in a stressful place right now, in a space where they're struggling. And so sometimes just reaching out and asking what they need is a place to start. If there's anything that you can do to help. Getting them connected with resources in the community, whether it's a therapist or talking to their doctor, to see what kinds of treatment options might be available. But making sure that they don't feel like they're by themselves. If you want to provide a little more detail in terms of the question, I might be able to answer it a little bit better, but that's what comes to mind initially, just that support and getting them connected with the resources that they might need in the community.
I have a comment, an observation that maybe you could comment on. Your slide, that was the bell curve that said people achieve more when they're in the blue part. Mm-hmm. As a wonderful procrastinator, I find that I used to be stressed, much more stressed, until I started realizing that I will not do things till the last minute. And once I accepted that about myself, I finally was able to let go until I was able to do that. But I still do get stressed. So I just was wondering if you could just talk a little bit more about that.
That's a very good point. So it sounds like you're saying that it's not that you're not stressed when you're procrastinating. You're actually quite stressed, just stressed in a way that doesn't lead you to do more. It's not a motivating stress.
Right.
It's a demotivating stress.
Right. And so I had to wait until I just won't do it till the last minute. So I had to accept that about myself.
And now what happens?
I found out that it works for me to do things in the last minute. Mm-hmm. And that's a good thing.
So that's good feedback. Not everybody procrastinates is calm along the way. And in fact, that is a stressor, right? Pushing off things, as long as you see that as a bad thing. But when you stopped seeing it as a bad thing and you started accepting it as a fact of life for you, it became less of a stressor and just the way things are. And so it shifted from that demotivating stress that's getting in the way more towards, okay, what do I want to spend my time on up until it's last minute and I'm ready to get it done?
Exactly.
It's good to know. That's good feedback.
Thanks. Thank you.
I have another question if nobody else has.
Sure.
If one is antisocial, would you agree that it leads to significant stress and anxiety? Asking for a friend.
So when you say antisocial, what exactly do you mean? Like an introvert, or do you mean like someone who doesn't feel like they have any desire to spend time with people because they
Yes,
don't?
they don't like to mingle, go out, socialize, meet new people, that sort of thing. That sort of socialization.
So in that situation, that sort of socialization is incredibly draining, right? It's not the kind of socialization that breeds connection and provides support. That kind of socialization for someone who feels that way does the opposite. It adds stress. But that doesn't mean that that person would be better off without any social interaction, right? We all need someone. It doesn't have to be a large group of people, but having some kind of meaningful connection with someone is really important for all of us. So it is perfectly fine for someone who considers themselves to be antisocial or introverted to shy away from those kinds of social outings, as long as they've got some kind of social connection and outlets that do feel comfortable, and that person would kind of interact with as often as they feel comfortable doing that. You know, that no man is an island quote, like it's very true. And it's because our ancestors, like I said earlier, needed to be a part of a community in order to survive. And so we may think that we want absolutely nothing to do with anyone sometimes, but eventually we do need someone, even if it's just one person.
But you don't think socializing in groups is healthy for anybody's mental state?
Well, like we were saying, it depends on the person. It depends on what they're interested in or what they're into. For some people, socializing in groups is great. It brings a lot of energy. It helps us connect with other people and feel understood and like we're part of a community. And for other people, it's incredibly stressful and overwhelming. And that's not actually how they feel connected. It actually makes them feel more disconnected. It just depends on the person. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question quite the way you want me to, but
you answered it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have another question.
Okay.
When we're trying to help somebody or even ourselves, and the stress and anxiety reduction techniques you just gave us don't work, when is it the right time to maybe get some pharmaceutical or go to somebody to get medical help?
So when our stress level is outpacing our ability to cope, at that point, it's time to consider other options. I wouldn't necessarily say pharmaceutical or therapy, although actually I think therapy is always a good thing, regardless of your level of stress. But just in general, when you get to that point and you've been at that point for any amount of time, it's a great idea to look into other resources, to see what else is out there, to talk to your doctor, see what they recommend. You don't need to talk to a medical doctor in order to go see a therapist, but you would want to talk to one in order to look into pharmaceutical options. You know, pharmaceuticals can be very helpful, and it's actually the combination for more moderate to severe symptoms. A lot of research has supported the idea that it's a combination of therapy and medication that can help the most, as opposed to one of those without the other. But everybody's different, and it's always this cost benefit analysis of whether the potential downsides of a medication, the risks of side effects and things like that, are worth the potential upsides of taking it. And that's a decision you always want to make with your doctor. But it all has to do with, is what I'm doing working? Is it helping me? Am I able to complete my stress cycle on a regular basis? Once you get to a point where you're not feeling like that's the case, or you're having to work so hard to keep up that it's just draining you and you're not having enough quality in your life, it's a great idea to look into other options and see what else is out there. So thank you for that question.
Going back to the question about helping a friend or child or spouse or someone in your life who is extremely stressed, is there one of the ways that you mentioned to kind of decompress? Is there one of those that you should maybe start with when you're trying to help that person? I mean, obviously, there's so many levels of it, but if it's, let's just sit down and try to breathe first, like where do you start with it when they seem to be over the top?
Absolutely breathing, because it's something we're doing anyway, and how we're doing it can have such a direct impact on how we're feeling in that moment. And people here take a deep breath all the time, but they rarely actually do it. And if you're doing it with them and they're actually going through that experience, they can get that benefit in that moment. I would always start with breathing, slowing it down, lengthening the exhale, doing it together, and then shift into maybe some grounding, some distraction techniques, like notice where you are in space. How does the furniture feel against your body? You know, what's the texture of your clothing? What can you hear? What can you see? Because these are things that then that person can continue to do moving forward as they're figuring out what comes next. That's a good question. So I think in general, sharing any of these techniques can be helpful, and sharing what works for you if the person's open to hearing it. But it's important to check in with them first to see if they're in a space where they're open to receiving, they want the feedback and the help, or if they really just need you to listen and they need you to give them a safe space where they can share what's going on inside because they aren't feeling heard or understood. That can be another really helpful tool.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Does anyone have any other questions?
You talked about therapy, doctor, and a lot of people these days are going to therapy for one reason or another. But I mean, as adults, with seemingly normal behavior, again, asking for a friend, should we always be in therapy? It seems like some people are always in therapy for years for just minor things and just somebody to talk to. And I think, we need to really think about that. So what's your opinion on people are in perpetual therapy at things? I think asking for a friend.
Asking for a friend. Got it. So I think therapy has the potential to be helpful regardless of the level of struggle or problems that you have. I think a lot of people seek therapy not because they're not functioning well or because they have any serious problems. They want to get to know themselves better. And there's probably no better way to do that than by having a space where you can talk, you can hear yourself talk, you can have someone reflect back what they're hearing. And you can also create a relationship with that therapist that feels safe and trusting so that you've got that support, because not everybody has that in their lives or really has that safe space in which they can feel understood and heard. Now, go ahead.
No, but and I get that, but perpetually, I mean, wouldn't it be better to work with people and say, look, you need to go out and find some close friends that you can confide in that can support you, and I realize you're a therapist, so I'm cutting into your industry, but find a good personal support group and close friends that you can talk to versus always going to a stranger who I guess eventually may become a very close friend. But I struggle with people that are always going to therapy, and I truly am asking for a friend.
I understand. No, it's a good point you're making. And actually, this is a bit of a debate within the field. There's different forms of therapy. And the form that you're talking about, that long-term, like decades-long relationships, that is less the norm at this point. That form of therapy has its place, but in general, I think a lot of therapists in this day and age focus more on, we call it episodes of care, where when there's something going on, some specific things that we want to work on, you come in and then we have the relationship so that we can take a break. You're doing well, you're functioning well in the world. There's nothing else you really want to try to figure out at this point about yourself. Go off and live your life, but we've got a relationship. So if something happens in the future, you're feeling like your stress is outpacing your coping again, you can come back in and we can pick up where we left off. So I see it in somewhat the same way you do, in terms of, I don't think decades and decades of therapy is better, right? More therapy is not always better. It doesn't equal necessarily quality therapy. But at the same time, expecting people to try to like figure it out for themselves and go out and live their lives before they're ready to let go of that therapeutic relationship and the benefits that they get from it, simply because they should be able to figure it out on their own, which is not what you're saying, but that's what I'm saying. I think that's also shortchanging the potential benefits of therapy, because it's actually the therapeutic relationship that across all different forms of therapy has been shown to be one of the most helpful things about therapy. So that relationship is important. It's not a stranger. It is someone, and it's not a friend either. It's someone who becomes a safe space, that an impartial safe space. No one else in your life serves that role. Not a spouse, not a partner, nobody, because everybody's got their own stuff except for a therapist. So you can be free to talk about anything, not worry about anybody's feelings. And it's an incredibly therapeutic experience for a lot of people. Does that kind of address what you're saying?
It did. I disagree with you, but you're the professional. And one last question. I love your bookshelves.
Yeah.
Who made those?
My husband and I did. Actually, I'll give him all the credit. My husband made them. It's just bricks and wood. And
That's what I noticed.
Very clever. Cheap and clever. I like it.
And drilled into the wall so the kids won't pull it down. You have every right to disagree with me. I completely respect that. So thank you for sharing.
I personally haven't had therapy, but I have a very close friend that has, and had to get over a lot of neglect from a mother issue and family issues. And she still sees a therapist today, but only when it's almost like she can't get past something, and that therapist seems to show her the light as to how to deal with it. And I can't explain it, but that's the only way she's ever explained it to me, that when something very traumatic happens, or something that is just overwhelming, just having that one meeting after not talking to her for 6 months then brings her back to the space in her head that reminds her of how she can deal with it and what she can do and the techniques that she can come back to kind of self-reliance, just in a way.
I'm so glad she has that experience. That reminds me of a cartoon I once saw that I thought so aptly described therapy. It was the therapist sitting on one side and the patient on the other, and the patient above their head had a mess of different colors yarn, just all jumbled together. And over the therapist's head, each of those different colors had been rolled up into a neat little ball. And that's exactly what the therapist and the patient are doing together, taking what feels like a jumble in the patient's head and just understanding it better, tying it up into not neat little packages, so to speak, but just unraveling it. That's probably a better word, unraveling it. And we all need that from time to time, whether we get it from a friend, loved one, or a therapist. But it's nice to be open to it and have the option when the need arises. So does anyone else have any other questions?
No, just a comment. It was extremely interesting and helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm glad you found it helpful. I've really enjoyed spending this time with you all, and this is what I enjoy doing, and I find it incredibly helpful to be able to use this stuff myself. And so I feel like the more widely it can be disseminated, the more we can all just cope better in this day and age. And so I'm glad you were all open and interested.
Yes, thank you so much, Rachel. Dr. Faust, it was wonderful. I I really enjoyed the progressive muscle relaxation technique after a stressful day at work. And I was hunched over my computer, so my shoulders feel so much more relaxed. And so all of these tools were just very helpful that we can use throughout the day. And if you know of anyone dealing with stress and anxiety, don't hesitate to help them and reach out to Dr. Faust.
Yes, just to be clear, like I had said earlier, I only see patients of the offices where I work. So I don't take outside patients, unfortunately, because if I were to do that, I wouldn't be able to still have room for the patients I do see in the office. But a number of different Mercy practices have behavioral health consultants like myself embedded within them. So if you see a Mercy primary care provider, you can check and see if they have a BHC like myself in there. And if not, there's a lot of great therapy options in the community. Psych BC, or I think it's now called Life Stance Health, I have a number of different practices in the community. And if you're interested, I'm always happy to provide more resources. So thank you again, everyone. Have a good rest of your night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Before you go, I have a few upcoming programs I'd like to share with you guys. So we have a virtual Passover Seder coming up next Friday from 12 to 1. If you're interested, please reach out to me, Melissa Shremplin at mshremplin at mayersonjcc.org. We have our next upcoming Jewish Hospital Mercy Health Speaker Series, Overall Bladder Health, on Tuesday, May 4th from 5:30 to 7. And you can go ahead and sign up for that on our mayersonjcc.org website. So thank you. And thank you again, Dr. Faust. And thanks for joining us. And enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Night.
Good night.
Good night.